Hi guys, in this video I'm going to do the analysis of the poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. And as always, the first thing that we do is look at context quickly. And if I just go through the context of this poem, we know that Browning, his poetry criticizes social norms and that he was rebellious in the way that he lived. So he challenged these social norms. For example, his wife was older than him. And he was also inspired to write this poem after hearing the story of the Duke of Ferrara. So those are just quick contextual points that you should know. So if we just write that down. So I've also added here just an extra contextual point that is quite important. It's more important than any of the three that I just said. That this poem is linked to the Victorian society, and there's three parts that we can split this into. So first of all, we need to know that in the Victorian society, women had no rights, the upper class had more privileges, and your reputation was equivalent to your social status. So if your reputation went down, your social status went down. And that's one of the key things that is in this poem and what Browning is suggesting through his words. Now, the next thing we look at is the form of the poem, and the form is a dramatic monologue. So if we write that as well. So that's the form of this poem. And we also look at the attitudes, and the main attitudes in this poem are pride, jealousy, and power. So those are the three attitudes that we look at. And we also look at the links to other poems that we could use when we're writing our essays, when we get the exam questions. And those poems, I think, would be Tissue, Remains, Poppies, and Ozymandias. So those are the poems I would link this poem to. Just to go, just a quick summary of what we've just looked at. We've looked at the context, the form of the poem, the attitudes that are in this poem, and the links to other poems. And one more thing we need to do just before we start is go through a quick summary of My Last Duchess. So, quickly, if you just listen, I'm not going to write anything yet. So the Duke proudly points out his former wife to his visitor. So that happens right at the start of the poem. And the Duke was angered by his flirtatious wife and he wanted to put a stop to it. That's what happens, we find out through reading the poem when we read on. And there are strong hints that the Duke may have murdered his wife. And the visitor, we find out right at the end, has come to arrange the Duke's next marriage. So that is what happens in this poem. If you want the summary and the context of My Last Duchess in more detail, there are separate videos on my channel, so you can go and watch those. And so let's begin the analysis. So the first quote that I'm going to look at is this one. Now remember that the quotes that I pick are not the only ones that you can pick. There are lots and lots of quotes here and you can do lots and lots of analysis, but these are the ones that I would pick. So the first quote I picked is on the second line and it says, looking as if she were alive. Now this creates a sinister tone. There's some imagery here and there also may be a regretful tone and it could signify a potential death. So that's the analysis that I would think of that quote. So at the start of the poem, we don't really know if the Duchess is alive or not. And we can just think about it when it says, that's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. It just signifies a potential death. And we can zoom in on a sinister tone and a regretful tone. So that's the first quote that I would pick. And the second one is here. So this quote says, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries, some officious fall, and then broke in the orchard for her. Now here, you can highlight this next part here, but I just want to focus on these two lines just for now. And it's actually listing. And what happens is that when we analyze it, we can say that all lists come to an end like she did, so the Duchess. And it could also symbolize how the Duke's needs were endless and she couldn't fulfill them. One more thing you could say about this quote, like if you put it all in as one, is that it highlights how traditional arranged marriages never ended in love. So I think those are the three kind of points that we can come out with, the explanations of this listing here. So I think that these are the most important things we can highlight from this quote, and make sure you know them, all three of them. I think it's quite important to have multiple analysis of one quote so you can link it back to whatever the question is asking you. So here is our next quote, and it says, "My gift of a 900 years old name." Now this is a motif of social status, and it's a metaphor, for lineage, that and that he gave her a gift of significance which she took for granted and she degraded it. And due to his high status, the only punishment was death for her. So this is a very important quote in this poem, and I think that you should highlight and zoom in on the fact that it's a motif of social status, because 900 years old name, so it's like it's going through the generations, and she's degraded it, and because of his high reputation in society, he's had to punish her with death. So I think that this quote is one of the most key quotes in this whole poem, because it's linking to social status, is linking to the Victorian society, is linking to all of the things that we said at the beginning. So women had no rights, the upper class had more privileges, and the reputation was your social status. And because of your social status, because of how high it is, the Duke's social status, the only punishment that his wife would get was death. Now, I think that on the next line, the word stoop, so it's a verb, it could potentially highlight that she has no one but herself to blame for her inevitable death. So I think that you could link both of these quotes. They're like on the same lines, basically, the first line and second line, so 2 lines. You can link them together when you're explaining. And the next quote that I think is quite important is right here. So it says, "This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together." So the first thing that I would say is that this is euphemism, and there's a theme of jealousy and imagery of death, because it emphasizes the message that the Duke wants to portray to the visitor about his daughter's fate if he acts like the Duchess. And it kind of downgrades the role of a woman's importance. And it kind of, you can signify from it and explain from it that a woman is like an object who's passed from family to family. And this suggests the power that comes from the Duke's name. This is another really, really key quote you should have in your analysis. I also think that we can zoom into the caesura right over here, and just say that it highlights how all the smiles did stop. So it's like a stopping point, and of how harshly everything that the Duke didn't like just stopped, because of how powerful he is, because of his name, because of his social status. So the final quote, or kind of word that I want to zoom in on, is here. So is my object. And I think that it's quite important because, again, it's a motif of social status. And it's kind of the Duke is taking ownership of the visitor's daughter already. So it's very key. So even at the end, so there's a constant motif of social status and how women are owned by the men, which is exactly what happened in the Victorian society. So that's contextually linked. So if we just say that it's a metaphor and it's a motif of social status, and it highlights the fact that the Duke is already taking ownership of the visitor's daughter, is exactly what you need to write for this quote. So just to go over it one more time, I've said that the my object part here, so at starting, so right at the beginning, is my object, is a metaphor. So the Duke is already taking ownership of the visitor's daughter. And that links to the Victorian society contextually, where women had no rights. And it's also a motif of social status. And this comes up quite a lot in this poem. So that was a analysis of quite a few different quotes. If you still don't understand a lot about the context and the summary, if you still don't get it, please make sure you watch the in-depth videos of that for this poem. Yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching.